Ozzy Osbourne. Born John Michael Osbourne in Birmingham, England in 1948, is one of the most iconic figures in rock and heavy metal, rising to fame as the lead vocalist of Black Sabbath in the late 1960s. He helped pioneer the heavy metal genre with dark, powerful sounds and haunting lyrics. After leaving the band, his solo career soared with hits like Crazy Train and Mr. Crowley. Known as the Prince of Darkness, Ozzy is also famous for his wild stage antics, personal struggles, and later his reality TV show, The Osbournes. Despite controversies, he remains a legend of rock history. Despite being a metal icon, Ozzy has had a very diverse, even controversial taste in music, and here are 6 of his favorite bands, with many dramatic and emotional behind-the-scenes stories. Ozzy Osbourne applauds Green Day when Ozzy Osbourne, the legendary Prince of Darkness and founding voice of heavy metal, publicly expressed his admiration for Green Day. It sent shockwaves across the rock and metal community. For decades, Ozzy had been synonymous with dark riffs, haunting atmospheres, and the groundbreaking sound of Black Sabbath, which essentially created the heavy metal genre. So when he admitted to being a fan of a California punk rock band, some die-hard metal fans saw it as nothing less than a betrayal. Many accused him of abandoning the very spirit of the music he helped define, while others simply couldn't understand how someone so deeply rooted in heavy metal could relate to Green Day's more melodic, punk-driven energy. Yet for Ozzy, his fondness for Green Day was not a contradiction, but a continuation of the spirit that defined his own beginnings. He admired their rebellious attitude, their refusal to conform, and their ability to channel raw energy into accessible songs. To Ozzy, punk rock, especially as embodied by Green Day, shared the same DNA as early heavy metal. Both were about rejecting societal expectations and creating something loud, unapologetic, and real. Another reason Ozzy praised Green Day was their commercial success and staying power. Albums like Dookie, 1994, and American Idiot, 2004, not only defined new eras of punk rock, but also captured the anger, frustration, and restlessness of their generation. This reminded Ozzy of Black Sabbath's rise in the late 1960s and early 1970s, when their heavy, ominous sound struck a nerve with youth disillusioned by war, politics, and cultural change, just as Black Sabbath gave voice to a generation of outsiders. Green Day became the anthem for millions of young fans searching for identity and defiance. Moreover, Ozzy appreciated the energy Green Day brought to the stage. Despite their punk background, their live performances carried the same intensity and chaotic spirit that had once made Ozzy bite the head off a bat or shock audiences with his outrageous behavior. In their own way, Green Day embraced showmanship, blending fun with fury. And that was something Ozzy could respect deeply as a fellow performer. The controversy surrounding his admiration highlighted a key truth about Ozzy. He has never been bound by rigid genre definitions. While others tried to cage him within the walls of heavy metal, Ozzy saw music as a broader force. For him, Green Day embodied the same rebellious heartbeat that had driven him throughout his life. It wasn't about whether the riffs were metal or punk. It was about attitude, authenticity, and the ability to connect with an audience on a visceral level. In the end, Ozzy's love for Green Day illustrates his openness as an artist and his ability to recognize greatness in forms that others might dismiss. Though criticized by purists, his perspective reminds fans that music is not about rigid categories, but about shared emotion and power. For Ozzy Osbourne, Green Day represented a reflection of his own journey, wild, defiant, and unforgettable. Kurt Cobain and Ozzy Osbourne's connection. Ozzy Osbourne, forever known as the Prince of Darkness and one of the architects of heavy metal, surprised many fans when he revealed his admiration for Nirvana, the grunge icons of the 1990s. At first glance, Black Sabbath's pioneering doom-laden sound and Nirvana's stripped-down grunge anthems might seem worlds apart. Yet, beneath the surface, Ozzy found something deeply relatable in Kurt Cobain and his band, a rawness and honesty that spoke directly to the darker corners of human experience. The mysterious link between Ozzy and Kurt Cobain has long intrigued fans. The two reportedly crossed paths once in a recording studio, but their meeting was fleeting and left behind no official collaboration or photos. Still, that brief encounter carried symbolic weight. 2 generations of rock outsiders, both scarred by inner demons, standing on common ground. For Ozzy, Kurt embodied the same sense of alienation and anguish that had once fueled the early days of Black Sabbath. Initially, Ozzy admitted that he wasn't sure what to make of grunge. The stripped-down, anti-glam aesthetic of Nirvana was far removed from the theatrical excesses that had come to define heavy metal. But as Nirvana's music gained momentum, Ozzy found himself drawn to its authenticity. Songs like Smells Like Teen Spirit and Come As You Are carried the same unfiltered pain and anger that he recognized from his own journey. Unlike many polished rock acts, Nirvana wore their flaws openly, and that vulnerability struck a chord with him. What resonated most for Ozzy was the spiritual kinship he felt with Kurt Cobain. Both men were artists who lived with profound emotional struggles, and both channeled their suffering into their music. Ozzy saw in Kurt a kindred soul, someone whose genius came with unbearable burdens. Though they never collaborated, Ozzy often spoke of feeling an invisible connection to Cobain's artistry, describing Nirvana's music as hauntingly honest. For Ozzy, Nirvana represented not just a new genre, but a continuation of rock's deepest purpose: to give voice to the lost, the broken, and the misunderstood. The darkness and fragility in Kurt's lyrics mirrored the despair and raw energy that had made Black Sabbath so revolutionary decades earlier. Both bands, in their own eras, challenged conventions and forced audiences to confront uncomfortable truths about pain, society, and identity. In the end, Ozzy's admiration for Nirvana was about recognition of a shared spirit across generations. He saw in Nirvana the same fire that had once burned in him, rebellious, wounded, and unrelentingly human. Though their time together was brief and their paths never fully intertwined, Ozzy's respect for Nirvana highlighted a universal truth about music. Genres may differ, decades may pass, but when artists pour their souls into their work, the echoes remain timeless. For Ozzy, Nirvana was not just another band, but a reflection of his own struggles, a reminder that true artistry always comes from embracing both beauty and pain. Ozzy Osbourne and Lemmy's metal bond. Among all of Ozzy Osbourne's connections in the rock and metal world, his admiration for Motorhead, and especially for its iconic frontman Lemmy Kilmister, stands as one of the most important and enduring. While Ozzy had already secured his legacy as the Prince of Darkness with Black Sabbath and his solo career, his creative partnership with Lemmy in the early 1990s became a defining moment that enriched both of their artistic journeys. The collaboration reached its peak with Ozzy's 1991 album, No More Tears. Lemmy co-wrote several of the album's biggest hits, including Mama, I'm Coming Home, Hellraiser, Desire, and I Don't Want to Change the World. These songs blended Ozzy's melodic sensibilities with Lemmy's raw, hard-edged lyricism, producing a powerful balance that resonated with fans worldwide. Mama, I'm Coming Home, in particular, remains one of Ozzy's most beloved tracks, showcasing a side of him that was both vulnerable and universal, a testament to Lemmy's ability to tap into Ozzy's emotional core as a performer. Behind the scenes, however, their relationship wasn't without friction. There were occasional tensions about songwriting credits and royalties, issues that often plagued the music industry, but instead of allowing these disputes to damage their bond, Ozzy and Lemmy managed to work through them with mutual respect. They both understood that their collaboration was larger than individual egos. It was about pushing the boundaries of heavy metal and giving fans something timeless. This ability to overcome conflict and maintain friendship speaks to the deep regard they had for one another. Ozzy viewed Lemmy as the essence of rock and roll, authentic, rebellious, and a genuine friend, maintaining lasting respect and admiration for him. In the grand narrative of heavy metal, the alliance between Ozzy Osbourne and Motorhead highlights the power of collaboration between legends. Their partnership demonstrated how two distinct voices could come together to create something greater than the sum of its parts. For Ozzy, loving Motorhead was never about choosing between bands or genres. It was about honoring a friendship and recognizing the raw, unfiltered spirit of rock that both he and Lemmy embodied. Together, they proved that heavy metal is not just a sound, but a brotherhood built on respect, resilience, and the shared fire of creativity. Ozzy Osbourne, Judas Priest, respect forged. Few stories in heavy metal history are as layered as the relationship between Ozzy Osbourne and Judas Priest. Both emerged from Birmingham, England, the gritty industrial city often called the birthplace of heavy metal. In the 1970s and 1980s, Ozzy with Black Sabbath and Rob Halford with Judas Priest stood as titans of the scene, each pushing the genre in unique directions. Yet beneath the competition, Ozzy always harbored admiration for Judas Priest and their groundbreaking sound. A particularly fascinating detail is that Rob Halford nearly replaced Ozzy in Black Sabbath not once, but twice. The first time came in the late 1970s, when Ozzy's chaotic lifestyle and struggles with substance abuse made his place in Sabbath unstable. Although the band ultimately chose Ronnie James Dio, Halford's name was seriously considered. The second moment arrived in the early 1990s, when Halford actually stepped in temporarily to front Black Sabbath during live performances while Ozzy was absent. These near crossovers created a strange bond between the two frontmen, a mix of rivalry, irony, and deep mutual recognition. On the surface, Sabbath and Priest were rivals, competing for dominance in the British metal scene. Sabbath embodied doom and heaviness, laying the foundation of the genre, while Judas Priest introduced speed, dual guitar attacks, and Halford's soaring vocals that redefined what heavy metal could sound like. Fans often debated which band represented the truest form of metal. Despite this rivalry, Ozzy was open in expressing admiration for Halford's talent and charisma, calling him one of the greatest singers in rock history. The rivalry between Ozzy and Judas Priest fostered respect and solidarity, showcasing their shared passion for heavy metal and mutual admiration over the years. For Ozzy, loving Judas Priest was not about forgetting the rivalries of the past, but about acknowledging the shared struggle and triumph of two bands that carried heavy metal from obscurity into mainstream recognition. It was a bond built on Birmingham roots, forged through competition, but ultimately sealed by mutual respect. In celebrating Judas Priest, Ozzy affirmed a larger truth, that heavy metal thrives not on division, but on the coexistence of multiple powerful voices. Robert Plant's influence on Ozzy Osbourne. Ozzy Osbourne has often spoken about how deeply Led Zeppelin influenced both his personal journey and the musical identity of Black Sabbath. The story begins with a seemingly ordinary but fateful encounter. As a young man in Birmingham, Ozzy crossed paths with Robert Plant, the charismatic frontman of Led Zeppelin, at a subway station. That brief meeting left a lasting impression. Ozzy later recalled how surreal it felt to see Plant in person, a figure who already embodied the larger-than-life aura of rock music. For Ozzy, it was a moment that confirmed the possibility of turning dreams into reality. Led Zeppelin's music came to define the golden age of hard rock in the late 1960s and early 1970s. Their sound, driven by Jimmy Page's guitar riffs, John Bonham's thunderous drumming, John Paul Jones's versatile musicianship, and Plant's soaring vocals, pushed rock into heavier, more mystical territories. For Ozzy and the members of Black Sabbath, this was both inspiring and challenging. Sabbath had been experimenting with blues and rock, but watching Zeppelin's dominance convinced them they needed to carve a path that was even darker, heavier, and more distinct. Out of this realization came the birth of heavy metal, as we know it, for Ozzy personally. Robert Plant was a major source of inspiration. Plant's vocal range, stage presence, and sheer command over an audience became a benchmark that Ozzy admired deeply, even while feeling intimidated. In interviews, Ozzy admitted that he sometimes feared being overshadowed by Plant's greatness, yet, instead of discouraging him, that fear drove him to develop his own unique style, more haunting, more primal, and perfectly suited for the ominous sound Black Sabbath was creating. In many ways, Plant's brilliance forced Ozzy to find his own voice, both literally and artistically. Ozzy Osbourne admired Led Zeppelin, crediting them for inspiring Black Sabbath's darker sound, pushing boundaries, and influencing his personal musical career significantly. Ultimately, Ozzy's love for Led Zeppelin was about more than fandom. It was about recognition. He saw in Zeppelin the spark that ignited his own creative fire. They were the giants who paved the way, and from their inspiration, Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath forged their own legend in heavy metal history. Ozzy's rock roots, the Beatles, for all the darkness, chaos, and heavy riffs that defined Ozzy Osbourne's career, the deepest root of his musical inspiration lies in the bright, transformative melodies of the Beatles, long before he became the Prince of Darkness. Ozzy was a young boy in Birmingham whose life changed the moment he first heard their songs on the radio. To him, the Beatles were not just another band. They were the sound of possibility, proof that ordinary boys from working-class England could change the world with music. Ozzy often recalls with humor and tenderness how deeply the Beatles shaped his imagination as a child. In one bizarre yet innocent fantasy, he even imagined Paul McCartney marrying his older sister, a daydream that revealed how much he wanted to be connected to his idols. For a boy growing up in a bleak industrial town, the Beatles represented magic, escape, and hope. Their music was the first spark that made him believe music could be more than background noise. It could be a lifeline. Ozzy's devotion to the Beatles shaped his musical path, with their emotional depth influencing his songwriting and providing guidance through his adolescence and artistic ambitions. Even at the height of his fame, when Ozzy stood as a pioneer of heavy metal, he never hesitated to call the Beatles his greatest influence. He often described them not only as a source of inspiration, but as a part of his soul, a permanent reminder of where his love for music began. Ultimately, Ozzy's love for the Beatles was about more than admiration. It was about gratitude. They gave him his first dream, his first heroes, and the emotional foundation that made him who he is. In every scream, riff, and haunting lyric he performed, there was still a piece of that boy from Birmingham who once closed his eyes, listened to the Beatles, and imagined a bigger life. Ozzy Osbourne's lasting legacy. Ozzy Osbourne's legacy transcends music, cementing him as both the Prince of Darkness and a cultural icon. From pioneering heavy metal with Black Sabbath to achieving global fame as a solo artist, Ozzy reshaped rock history. His wild persona, combined with vulnerability and honesty, made him relatable to generations of fans beyond the stage. The Osbournes reality show brought him into pop culture, proving his influence far beyond metal. His greatest legacy lies in inspiring countless musicians, proving that authenticity, resilience, and daring creativity can leave an indelible mark on the world. Ozzy's unexpected musical soul. Ozzy Osbourne's musical taste reveal the complex, multi-dimensional man behind his madman persona. From the Beatles to Led Zeppelin, from Motorhead to Nirvana, the bands he admired not only shaped his artistry, but also reflected the depth of his spirit. These influences fueled his creativity, guided his path, and ultimately built the foundation for his legendary career. Ozzy's journey proves that even the wildest rock icons are, at heart, fans first, driven by inspiration, passion, and love for music that transcends generations. If Ozzy's story inspired you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's keep the spirit of rock alive.